For most successful pro athletes, their lives have been defined by the sports they play.
Kyle Petty is going to win the Coca-Cola 600.
Careers full of triumphs, defeats, and compelling drama.
It is one of the defining moments, if not the defining moment of my life.
But when it's time to step away from that competition, the transition to retirement presents a new set of challenges.
One day I woke up and it's like, whoa. This is crazy, man. One or the other. And from the time I was little, all I wanted to do was drive.
As former stars embark on the next stages of life.
I've always had opinions, and not always PC opinions, I will say that. You either like me or you don't.
Their journeys are well known, but sometimes there's more to the story.
Only people that have gone through it understand it, and everybody deals with it in a different way.
As we go off script.
He brings a lifetime of experience that is unmatched. Kyle Petty is a driver, team owner, philanthropist, and multi-generational competitor and observer of the sport. Yes, he has seen it all, but more importantly, he has lived it. This is your life.
This is my life right here.
This is your life. You know something else? You are a phenomenal storyteller, and that's what we're going to do today. Some of them might be incriminating, possibly inappropriate.
Okay.
Those are the ones we're going to shoot for.
That's what I like to give, the inappropriate stuff.
Your entire life since birth has been about family and racing.
Yeah.
Growing up Petty, I would imagine a huge blessing, but it also comes with a huge magnifying glass.
Yeah, but not so much where we grew up. We come from rural North Carolina. The people in our area were farmers. We just happened to grow race cars. That's what we did. I think it's the only place on earth that my father is known as Richard. Not the king, it's just Richard, because that's where he went to high school and that's where he grew up. And so it was a good place to grow up. It was a good place. You could go off and go to Daytona or California or New York City, wherever but you came back and it was a place to be grounded.
And you say that, he was just Richard, but your grandfather, Lee, was probably just Lee then too. You grew up in a little brick house.
Yeah.
Across the street, right down the road from the race shop.
My grandparents lived right next to the race shop, within 20 yards. And we lived about 30 or 40 yards the other side of that. Originally, when I was born, we lived in a trailer, not a mobile home, in a trailer in the front yard of my grandparents' house. And eventually my grandparents I think they let my mom and dad move into the big house for a little while they were building their house. But myself, my mom and dad, and my two sisters, Sharon and Lisa, before Rebecca was born, we lived in a 2,100 square foot brick house until I was 15, probably 15 years old before we moved to a little bit larger house. But we lived right there where the race cars were.
And you talk about traveling to the racetracks. I mean, you had a very unique childhood in the sense that, yes, you grew up in that home that was right by the race shop, but you grew up at a racetrack. And your dad was racing, so it was your mom who was basically a teacher, a mother, a psychologist. I mean, all of the things to take care of all of you guys.
I was born in June of 1960 and went to Daytona in July of 1960. So that was my first race, the first race that they drugged me down the highway to. My sister Sharon came along a year later, and we traveled always together with my parents. And we went the Northern Tour when they'd come to Fonda and Malta and Islip, New York. In the summertime, we'd go to Bristol, you'd go to Nashville and Maryville, Tennessee, places like that. They raced a lot of very small tracks back then. And we would travel away from home and come back. And during the summertime, we just went from track to track to track. And my mom was always really good about taking us places. Never forget, every time we went to Michigan, we went to the Henry Ford Museum because it was educational. When we went to Nashville, we went to the Hermitage to see where Andrew Jackson was and to learn the history of that area. And it was always amazing to me is my mom would take us on these day trips, as she called them, and we were just having a good time. And then you go back to school, and they would start teaching stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been there. I know that. I know that. It's the only thing I knew in school because I didn't learn anything else. It didn't seem like, but it was amazing to me that was my mom's focus. My mom's focus was not just to drag us to racetracks and watch my dad ride around in circles. It was to experience what this country was and to learn about it.
The truth is, this is what you and I do when we're on the road. We tell stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, where you guys are bouncing off the walls and your dad comes, knocks on the door. And
he'd won the race.
Won the race.
We had the mumps, the measles, and the chicken pox all within a 5-week period.
Wow.
My sister Sharon and myself did. So we were confined to a hotel room, was not allowed out in the sun, had the curtains drawn. My mom was trapped in a hotel room with us, and my dad goes to Daytona in '64 and wins the Daytona 500 for the first time.
Says Richard Petty in his number 43 Plymouth takes the checkered flag going away.
And we were recovering, so we were a little bit crazy. But imagine a motel room, not a hotel room, a motel room. So we were trapped in a motel, and my dad comes in with a trophy. And, you know, it's funny because I vaguely remember it, but I do remember that trophy and have remembered it my whole life. Living next door in the small house, that was one of the trophies he always displayed. Because that was so special to him. To win Daytona for the first time in '64 was such a big deal to him. That was a trophy he never let too far out of his sight. He won all the time. We would go to the race, and as we were packing the car to go to the race, you always had to say, okay, we can't sit here because this is where the trophy's going to ride when we come home.
Wow.
Because we were just that arrogant or that cocky, or we just believed that every race he went to, he was going to win a race. So lived in this small house, and my dad had trophies up in one place. My mom would put them out, but most of the trophies went in the attic. And you'd go up, pull the attic steps down, and go up, and on the rafters, you'd lay a piece of plywood and set the trophies on it. Mm-hmm. You just kept setting trophies on it. And so we're kids, and we're watching TV one night, and there's a racket in the attic, and a squirrel got in the attic. There's some squirrels, and that happens when you live in the country. And all of a sudden you hear it's like dominoes falling, and then right above our heads, one trophy sticks itself through the ceiling as it falls through the sheetrock because they had knocked all of them over. So that's when my mom moved them all out of the house. We fixed the ceiling, she moved them all over to the race shop, so they were in storage at the race shop after that.
Coming up, the challenges of growing up in an unconventional environment.
I would go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But as soon as the weekend comes, I'm going to a racetrack somewhere. So I didn't get to do things other kids did on the weekends.
And later, the sport that brought him so much joy also brings tragedy.
I got a phone call from Mike and said that Adam had been in a really bad accident. In this sport, you're always, as a driver, you have this mental block in your head where it's always going to happen to somebody else, always going to happen to somebody else.
Richard is a native of Randleman, North Carolina. He played football while attending Randleman High School and made the all-conference team. He also played basketball and baseball during his high school years. Petty's wife, Linda, was a childhood sweetheart. She's Richard's #1 fan. The Pettys have 3 children. Week after week during the summer and fall of 1967, 48 times, the Pettys loaded up their truck and pulled away from Level Cross for another race.
In your early years, safe to say your mom was your biggest influence?
Oh, yeah. Yes. When my father was on the road, it was myself and my sisters and my mom. So she pretty much looked after everything.
Yeah, you talk about being on the road. As an 8-year-old kid, I mean, did you even appreciate, or did you have an understanding of what you were getting to do?
No. I was just going to racetracks with my dad. I will never forget, we went to Michigan. We left Michigan and went to Riverside. Left Riverside, came to Texas, left Texas, swung back by the house, picked up another car and went to Daytona. But I got to ride in a truck for the first time. And I had a cast up to my thigh. I had broken my leg sliding down a slide, standing up on a silk blanket. That's a whole nother story. I was looking for speed and broke my leg. And so I rode in a truck, but I made them stop in every state, and I picked up a rock. Still have those rocks from when we stopped in every state. At the same time, we went through Battle Creek, Michigan. And I saw the Kellogg's factory, and I thought, oh my God, this is what you see on TV, Battle Creek, Michigan. This is where Kellogg's is at. So I looked more at stuff like that. That was pretty cool, but I never paid any attention to the race.
So you still have the rocks?
Still have the rocks.
All in a box?
All in a box, all in a cigar box, because my dad used to smoke cigars.
People might think that, racing was all you did or you were exposed to.
Yeah.
But in high school, you were an athlete in every sport. Football?
Yes.
Make sure I get them all. Football, basketball, baseball, golf. Track.
Ran track one year. Yeah. I went to a small school. You had to.
Yeah, but...
when you go to a small school, everybody does everything. And that was not odd.
So true or not, you had a football scholarship.
I had opportunities for football scholarships. I went to Georgia Tech for a recruiting weekend, went to Duke, so a couple of bigger schools.
Yeah.
So that was okay. East Carolina, some of that stuff.
Okay, you mentioned that you're from a small town, small
Yes.
school. You were the first non-African American member
Yes.
of the multicultural club
Of Randleman, North
at
Carolina.
Randleman High School.
I looked at school as one giant social occasion. You know what I mean? It was not about studying. It was that social event. So I liked everybody and wanted everybody to like me. And the thing was that I would go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But as soon as the weekend comes, I'm going to a racetrack somewhere. So I didn't get to do things other kids did on the weekends. We'd leave at 11 o'clock on a Friday night and drive to Michigan, which was 13, 14 hours at the time, and run the race. And I carried tires on my dad's pit crew when I was in high school. And then we would drive back home, and we'd get home at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would take a shower and then go to high school again. So school, if there was a club, if there was something going on, then I wanted to be a part of it. So I just kind of hung out with everybody.
So I would love to define you or describe you as, you know, the joiner or the athlete. But I feel like hellion might be a better
That would be
description.
closer.
That would be accurate?
That would be closer.
Is it true that you got kicked out of a
We got
high
kicked out of a
school
basketball game because I blended in Randleman and in level cross. But when I started playing high school sports and you went other places, then everybody knew there's that petty kid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd take cheap shots playing football, or people would say stuff, and fans would say stuff in the stands. And, man, you're a kid. You hear that stuff. And I had it at this game. We were playing it one night, and I'd had about enough of it. I stopped about mid-court in a basketball game and flipped off the entire opposing grandstands. So they kicked me out of the game. And my mom starts screaming at the referees because they kicked me out. So they ask her to leave the gym too. So she just meets me in the parking lot and we go home. That's the end of it. That's the end of it.
You talked about her driving you to school sometimes.
Yeah.
Did she have a lead foot?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Well, first of all, how many tickets do you feel like the Petties got, and how many of them did you get out of?
That's a good question. For the amount that we have as a collective group, if they were all lottery tickets, we would stand a damn good chance of winning the lottery because we had bought so many. I will say that. I don't know. You know, it went both ways. It went both ways. You could the guy either come to the window and would recognize my dad or recognize you and talk to you and, you know, and that was good. Or he would come and recognize you and throw the book at you. So it went one way or the other.
All or nothing.
Up next.
People have always given me crap about ponytails and earrings because I wore earrings for a while. He has a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and wears sunglasses at midnight, and you calling me weird? You know what I mean? I grew up in the house with Richard Petty. He's the strange one, not me. That's not me.
Petty, Kyle, how are things going for your dad out there?
They're going all right now. They're going all right now. We've been changing tires, and we're a little behind on the tires, so we got to get them ready here.
Well, that's Kyle Petty. He's looking after the tires here for his dad.
So when you graduated high school, I think, what was it, the next year, you told your dad, I'm gonna drive race cars?
Told my dad I was going to race as I graduated.
Okay.
My mom had this grand delusion that she was going to buy the drugstore in town, and I was going to be a pharmacist.
Okay.
Okay. Now, was never going to happen. But she wanted me to be a pharmacist. So I wanted to drive a race car. I always had. So I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And they were like, no. My dad didn't start until he was 21. And that had always been the rule. You weren't going to get to drive a race car until you were 21. I'd never raced anything. And so my mom said, if you'll go, I'll relent, if you'll go to night school. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'll go to night school down at the local community college. I'll go to night school and start working on the cars. So my dad gave me a car. Myself and Steve Mill started working on the car, and we'd work on it sometimes during the day, most of the time at night after work, because we were working on my dad's stuff, because that's who made money. I was just wasting money. He was making money. And I went to night school for about a month, and got thrown out of night school because I would go straight from work to night school, and they kept saying I smelled like lacquer thinner and gasoline and had oil all over me, so I should at least clean up before I come to night school, but I was not going to clean up, so I got kicked out of night school, went back to work on the race car, and ended up putting it together and going to Daytona.
When was the first time you were in the car then? You made it before?
Daytona.
Yep. 18?
I turned 18 in June. The following January, the beginning of '79, we went to Daytona to test.
So what do you remember about it? Do you still remember the feeling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you ever forget that. And especially, I had never driven a race car. And I know that's hard for people to believe that I had been around race cars my whole life, but my dad drove the race cars. Mm-hmm. We worked on race cars. So we got the race car, put it together, and we went to Daytona. We went out to test, and my dad went out first. And run like 193, 94, 95 in it, I don't know. But the first thing he did, this is the best part. So he's in the driver's seat, and he says, and if you've ever been around race cars, there's one seat. Mm-hmm. And so they took the car cover, the old car covers like we used, and they laid it in the floorboard, and he said, get in. I'm gonna go show you how to get around Daytona. Okay, this sounds good. So I get in, and he's got on seat belts and a helmet and all this stuff. I'm just sitting in the floor. I got nothing. So he's out, and he's driving, and he's like, right here, there's a bump. You need to go above the bump here, and then you need to get down here, but it's best if you run up here. And he's explaining everything to me. And then he goes out, and we run about 185 or 90 then. And then he goes out and runs about 193 or 4. And he says, okay, your turn. So I strap in this thing, and I'm thinking, this is it, man. Mm-hmm. 18 years old, never been in a race car. You're at Daytona. I get to go drive. And I think I run like 152. I didn't know whether I was on the straightaways or in the corners. I mean, things come at you so fast and if you've never been that fast, you're just not processing it. And I tell people all the time, it was like, when you go to the eye doctor and they put the thing and it's like, can you see? Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Is that better? And then you get where you can see. And it's like every time I went out that first week, those first 2 or 3 days I was there, it was like I would take off down the backstretch and run up through the gears, and it would go click, click, click. And then I could see. Before that, it was like a blur.
How important was it to you, even at age 18 or at age 28 or 38, to distinguish yourself from your dad, from your grandfather?
You know what? It wasn't. And that is the funny part. It was never a conscious effort. And I said this when Adam came along. If you took my granddad and then took my dad and stood him and beside of him and talked to him, and then myself, and then Adam, we were 4 totally different people. And I don't know why. It was strange. We were our own individuals, and we did our own things, our own ways. And I've laughed my whole life. People have always given me crap about ponytails and earrings because I wore earrings for a while. He has a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and wears sunglasses at midnight, and you calling me weird? You know what I mean? I grew up in the house with Richard Petty. He's the strange one, not me. That's not me, you know what I mean? So, but we didn't try. It just kind of evolved that way.
After the break, Kyle recalls watching his son Adam follow in the family footsteps as a 4th-generation racer.
Going to the racetrack with Adam took me back to being 9 years old again. I thought my life, it'll never be any better.
This sport has obviously given you so much,
yes,
but it has most certainly, without question, taken so much away.
Yes. When you lose a child, only people that have gone through it understand it, and everybody deals with it in a different way. It is one of the defining moments, if not the defining moment of my life.
I think the other morning, coming in here was probably my special day in my life. I've come in here, 16 years or 15 years. I can remember coming to Daytona every year as my dad would say, a punk little kid. But I was my dad's biggest fan coming in here. But, this year I came in as a race car driver. I got my own trailer, I got my own crew. And it's a little bit different now, and you feel grown up. But you still remember the days that, like, you come and watch your dad run, you come and watch your grandfather run. And it's just special to start the whole season off. They don't put any pressure on us at all, making me start the biggest race of the year here at Daytona.
You mentioned Adam. Can you talk about going to the racetrack through his eyes?
Totally different. Going to the racetrack with Adam took me back to being 9 years old again. I was so excited to go to the racetrack with Richard Petty, with my dad, to go with Dale Inman, to go with those guys. And they would give me a rag and let me wax the car. And I thought, man, I'm helping this guys. I'm helping them run faster. I can wax this car. I'm helping them. And you felt like you were a part of something. And you're seeing, you know, Asheville Weaverville for the first time, or Greenville Pickens for the first time, and you get to go to Nashville to the fairgrounds when they would race there, and there's a Ferris wheel in the background, and it's like, man, you're seeing everything, and it's sensory overload. And then I came along and raced, and I think it's like anything, you just get jaded to it. You know, you get jaded to dragging in the racetrack, and there's 100,000 people there, and you know, you got sponsors and you got all this stuff. When Adam started racing, it was all fresh again, all new. And to look at it through his eyes and to see Caraway Speedway in Ashburn, North Carolina, to go to Daytona for the first time to him and watch his face when he came off the racetrack for the very first time. I was 18 years old again.
Let's talk about being on the road when you were a kid in this racing fraternity. What was that like for you?
I think being on the road and being Kyle Petty's son answers this question in itself. You know how crazy my dad is, and we just had a lot of fun growing up. There was always stuff we did. You know, there's never a dull moment in our family.
It makes you appreciate the sport. It makes you appreciate what you've been given, the opportunity to grow up with a Richard Petty and to grow up in this sport. And then to have a son that comes along, it totally changed the way I looked at things.
And when he won at Charlotte,
oh my God.
You said, I think you were prouder at that moment than anything in your life.
I've always said it, my two most special moments in this sport was 1979 at Daytona when my dad won, because we had really fallen on some tough times at Petty Enterprises. We had built a car, it didn't work out, brought it home that January, same test, switched it over to an Oldsmobile, and Richie Bars and Steve Mill, and they let me help hang that body, help fabricate, help be a part of it, because we didn't have enough guys working at the shop. And they worked their butts off to put that car together. And we go to Daytona, and they have the big fight in the middle of the backstretch, and lo and behold, my dad wins the race.
Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it. Down on pit road. It has gone crazy. The Petty crew is out there jumping up and down.
And it's like, God, couldn't have been any prouder. You felt like I built something. I was a part of building that car, and he won the race. When Adam came along and won that ARCA race, it was the same deal. I thought, my life, it'll never be any better. To be a part of your father's win and to be a part of your son's win, that was a huge moment.
18 years old. Wow, and we got a Coca-Cola bath down here in a big way. Adam, there's his dad jumping in, Kyle. Proud father. Adam Petty, grandfather, great-grandfather, father, now you.
Of all I ever did in the sport, those two moments are the greatest moments.
Well, and anyone who follows the sport knows that this sport has obviously given you so much, but it has most certainly, without question, taken so much away.
Yes.
To go from that high and to have that emotion, when you always have that memory of Adam, but you also always live with the fact that he's gone.
Yeah.
The auto racing world is mourning Adam Petty, a fourth-generation race car driver who died after a crash in Loudon, New Hampshire. Adam is the grandson of seven-time NASCAR champion Richard Petty and the son of Kyle Petty.
That was the hardest thing, because the sport had been so good to us. To my grandfather, I mean, it took our family from being from rural North Carolina to putting you on a stage and giving you the financial wherewithal to live. And I think in the sport, you're always, as a driver, you have this mental block in your head where it's always going to happen to somebody else, always going to happen to somebody else. And my grandfather had passed away early in 2000, and Adam had come up through the ranks and had run some late model stuff and had run the ASA series and had some success there and won a race. And we decided to move to the Xfinity series. And at that point in time, we were moving into the Cup Series with him. And we had planned, he had already run one race and went to New Hampshire for the Xfinity race. And the throttle basically hung going in turn 3, and he hit the wall. And I was in I was in London with Montgomery Lee, with my daughter, and I got a phone call from Mike Helton, and said that Adam had been in a really bad accident. And so I said, well, just call me back. So an hour or so went by, and he called me back, and he told me that he didn't make it. And I felt so bad for Mike Helton in that moment. I can't even describe how bad I felt for him to have to call me and tell me that my son had passed away. And I had Montgomery Lee with me, and she was young, and I couldn't tell her. So I couldn't get a plane out until the next day. So for 36 hours or so, I had to tell her that he was in an accident, but I couldn't tell her what had happened. And that was a hard 36 hours until we got back to the United States. But I mean, Adam loved to drive a race car and loved to be around racing people, and that joy that he had, I can't even describe it. He was just a 19-year-old kid. When somebody loves something that much, and he loved that ASA car and that ASA team, and he loved that Xfinity team, and to walk back in that shop after I got back and to talk to Chris Huzzy and all the guys that worked on his car was really hard, maybe the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But that totally changed my life, totally changed the direction that our company went in. But when you lose a child, only people that have gone through it understand it, and everybody deals with it in a different way. But it is one of the defining moments, if not the defining moment of my life.
You talk about his joy, and I think anyone you saw Adam smile everywhere he went. As large as his life was, even though it was cut so short, what's even larger is his legacy.
Yes.
And I know you talk about, I mean, you live with it, with his loss every day, but you've also somehow found, I don't know when the switch went up, but found a way to move forward in a way that has impacted the hundreds of thousands of kids whose lives are better because of his vision with Victory Junction.
You like to think so. You know, I pray so.
You guys and all the campers that come here, I hope they take a little bit of Adam's smile when they leave here, and it's because of this group. This was his original team. He loved these guys.
I'm going to go back in time a moment. When I was 14 at Talladega, my Uncle Randy was killed.
Yes.
My mother's brother. Mm-hmm. And I was on the pit crew, and Randy was on the pit crew. My dad came down pit road and had a left front wheel bearing that was burnt and was on fire. And at that time, we didn't have water on pit road, meaning hoses to spray things down. And we needed to spray it down more so than put fire extinguisher on it. So we carried these huge tanks, and you'd put water in them, and then you'd put air pressure in them, and it would force the water out. Randy was putting the air pressure in the tank. I had the hose and was helping spray, and the tank exploded, and it killed him instantly. And I will never forget having to ride home in the car with all those guys. My dad went ahead and they put him on a plane and flew him home, but we rode home, and I rode home with Dale and Wade and that group of guys. And it struck me on the way home that you couldn't go back. You can't go back and fix it. I can't go back. Of all the things that I thought you could fix and that could be fixed when you're a kid, you can't go back and fix that. I'm never going to have Randy again. He was only 5 years older than me. As I said, my mother's brother. And
he was your uncle, but he was more like a
brother.
Yeah.
More like a brother, because we'd grown up together. He played football, I wanted to play football. He was a catcher, I wanted to be a catcher, that kind of thing. So something clicked in my head at that, and I'll never forget just riding in that van, nobody talking, everybody quiet. And when Adam's accident happened, it was the same thing. You can't go back, so you have to move forward. So after his accident, when we built camp, then you looked at camp and you thought, yeah, we're going to do something. This is going to be good. You know, we're moving forward. Everybody's moving forward. This is our goal. I'd been fortunate and driven a car with Paul Newman, and when Adam's accident happened, it was like, let's build a camp. You know, Adam had talked about it because we do the Kyle Petty charity ride, and we'd raise money for different children's hospitals for so many years. And Adam and I had been on a ride to Boggy Creek in Florida, and he was like, why don't we do the ride and stop at hospitals? Why don't we just build a camp? So when his accident happened, we put all those pieces together and said, yeah, let's build a camp. And then it's like, oh my God, we got a camp. Is anybody gonna come? What are we gonna do now? You know, we gotta see kids. And that first year, I think we saw 600 and some kids. We were there every day. I was there every day. And I think for me, it was incredibly emotional, but an incredibly healing experience, because it's like all of a sudden, there's 600 kids at camp who have the same smile Adam had, who have that same joy that Adam had, who have that same passion to be around each other and to learn and to grow. And that's always been my saying since then. You know, if a kid comes to camp and leaves and has Adam's smile, I know Adam's still here. And that's the way I feel about it. And we've been very, very blessed that I think we've seen 24,000, 25,000 kids. And it's totally free of charge. That's what the charity ride is all about, is helping to raise money for that. We lost one son, but I feel like our family has gained 25,000 kids. Oh, King Richard, this is a crazy, crazy Kyle Petty story.
Coming up, third-generation racing royalty chooses an unlikely career path.
Next thing you know, I get this record deal from RCA and open for Hank Jr., and there were like 35,000 people. Wow. It was crazy, man. No one can catch you at all.
You have your guitar. That's, I mean, you travel with that every week?
Travel with it everywhere I go.
Everywhere you go. Where'd you learn to play?
I learned to play from a guy named Daryl Griffin, okay, in Randleman, North Carolina. Daryl was a great teacher. It was funny because I grew up, a guy named Bill Frazier, who was a preacher that came to the racetracks. He loaned me his guitar, so I learned with it. But he and Marty Robbins, that drove a race car, were the first two guys I ever saw play a guitar, and I was mesmerized that they could make music out of something like that. And I thought, yeah, I'm 12 years old, I want to do that. And girls like it. So I want to do that.
You landed a record deal?
Here's what happened. This is a crazy, crazy Kyle Petty story. We did our 2-record set, vinyl. Okay. Myself, Del Jarrett, Bill Elliott, bunch of drivers. This guy came up with the idea, and he said, here's what we're going to do. I'm bringing these songwriters. They're going to interview you guys, and then they're going to write a song for you, and then you guys are going to sing it, and then we're going to sell these albums. We're going to make money. We made some money. Now, I'm not lying. I mean, it's hard to believe that we made a little money off this thing, but part of it was you have to help me promote it. You got to make one appearance. Okay. So I'm in North Carolina, and the guy calls me, and he says, hey, I need you. Y'all are going to Riverside. Can you stop in Nashville and help me promote the record? Yeah, no problem. So I go to Nashville. I'm on this show, and they say, you want to sing your song? Yeah, I'll sing it. What the heck? Got a little studio audience. It's not a big audience. It's a small studio. I'll sing it. What the heck? So I go on to sing it. I get on a plane. I go to California. So I'm out in California, and it's early 80s, and these fans come up to me, and they're like, hey, man, saw you on TV singing. Great job. And I'm like, thanks, dude. So another group comes up and says, hey, man, saw you on TV. Good interview. Great singing. I'm thinking, can I ask you something? And they said, yeah. And I said, were you in Nashville on vacation or something? How did you see me on TV? Oh, no. That's a cable show. Again, I'm from rural North Carolina. We didn't have cable. Okay, I didn't know what cable was. So it's Ralph Emery and Nashville Now, which was a huge show.
Absolutely.
It was like the Johnny Carson show of country. Yeah, you know. So I had no clue. So a friend of mine who had done some racing stuff, and a friend of Richard Childress's named Don Light, he called, he said, hey man, saw you on TV. You want to give this, would you be interested in talking to me and about being your manager or trying something? I'm like, what the heck, let's try it.
Do it.
Next thing I know, every Wednesday night, boarding a commercial flight in Greensboro, North Carolina, flying to Atlanta. I do 2 sets in a bar called Stonewalls. I catch the 12:30 flight out of Atlanta and fly back home and go to work the next day. And so I'm doing racing, I'm driving a race car and doing this, and I'm going to Atlanta, I'm doing music. So next thing you know, I get this record deal from RCA, and I'm opening for Randy Travis, open for Hank Jr., and there were like 35,000 people. Wow. It was crazy, man. You go on stage playing a guitar with 35,000 people, and I'd just been playing in a bar or playing by myself. And now all of a sudden I'm doing that. And one day I woke up and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is crazy, man. One or the other. And from the time I was little, all I wanted to do was drive. So this was like a hobby. This was fun. And I didn't want this to become work.
A job.
Yeah. It wasn't. I didn't want it to be my work. I wanted it to be what it was. A place of solace, a place you could retreat to and do your stuff. So that's what I went back to doing that, and that's it.
Is it true that in 1996, Soundgarden recorded a song called Kyle Petty, Son of Richard?
Faster than a flashlight.
This is a song about Kyle Petty, son of Richard. So we named it Kyle Petty, son of Richard.
Wow.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
But you recorded a song or wrote a song titled "Oh King Richard."
No, I didn't write it. I did record it. A guy named Rodney Crowell wrote it. Rodney was a big Richard Petty fan at the time.
Would you play a little bit for us?
You know what? I don't know if I can play it.
Come on.
I may not know it all. It goes, "Oh, King Richard, you rum runner's dream, the swiftest of outlaws I've ever seen. Your checkered flag waving so high in esteem that no one can catch you at all."
Still to come, Kyle's third act on the small screen comes with a price.
The hardest part about doing this thing, the TV stuff, is calling out people on the racetrack that you love and care about. You either like me or you don't. And I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
How many times do you have to talk about or do people ask you about your hair?
All the time. Here's what happened with my hair. I went to a barber in Randleman, North Carolina named Junebug Swain. Okay? And Junebug, I would go in and you had a chair like this and Junebug would put a board across the chair and I would sit in the chair and he would shave my head. I swore if I ever got out of my mom's house, my hair was going to grow. So as I got older, it got a little longer, but she still made me keep it cut. But as soon as I was out, it started to grow. When I went to drive for Felix and drive for Sabco, and Felix is an amazing man. I love Felix Sabatis to death. But he complained about my hair constantly, constantly. So we're going to Talladega, and I said, I'll just get it cut. I'll get it cut.
What year is this?
91.
Okay.
91. We just got the Mellow Yellow deal. Just signed the Mellow Yellow deal with Coca-Cola. So I cut my hair and show up, and I look good. I look good. I had a haircut. And about halfway through the race, there was a big wreck in the backstretch. Cracked my hip, compound fracture my left femur, broke some ribs. Anyhow, I had to set out 4 months, something like that, and couldn't drive. And I told Felix, who is from Cuba and was a little superstitious on things, it was because of the haircut. The haircut was the reason. Broke the karma, broke my mojo, that's it, gone. So I'm gonna have to grow it back out. And he's like, okay, no problem.
Was there a pre-race ritual?
I had two things at the Wood Brothers. One, I had a favorite pair of underwear that I only raced in this one pair of underwear, okay? I lived down around Charlotte at the time, and they were in Stewart, Virginia, which is 3 hours away, 3.5 hours away. So one day I left the underwear on the truck, and they threw the underwear away.
These are the lucky, like the
They're
lucky
my lucky underwear.
Okay.
My lucky underwear.
You're not going to believe it, but when he was on such a run and doing well,
Won the 600?
yeah, all of a sudden, he lost his lucky underwear.
So I had to drive from Charlotte to Stewart, Virginia, and got there at 8:30, 9 o'clock, dug through the dumpster, got the underwear, okay, because they'd thrown them away, got the underwear, and they just had grease and stuff where they just piled them in. Anyhow, this is how much I know. So I was going to put some Clorox on them, get the stains out of them, okay? Well, when I pulled them out, there was nothing left but the band. Just the band. No underwear, just the band. So for the rest of that year, I just wore the band. I just wore the band because that was the last of the luck I had, was just with the band when I would race. So we did that, and before we went to Richmond, we went out to pizza. We had pizza. So we'd go to pizza every Saturday night before a race, just see if we could get it to repeat.
I feel like there's a follow-up, and I just don't know if I want to go.
Oh, you can follow.
I mean, so just the band and another pair of underwear?
No, just the band.
Oh,
just
Kyle.
the band.
So,
just the band. That saves weight.
Just a band.
Just the band.
He wore the band for 4 races, but you know the magic was not in the band, and it's been downhill ever since for Kyle.
We talked about music, racing. Let's talk TV. That's the life we live, you live
TV.
now. Did you ever think you would transition from racing? The next chapter would be television?
No.
Broadcasting?
Never thought about TV. When a good friend of ours passed away, Benny Parsons, I loved Benny and had grown up with Benny, you know. And Benny had talked a few times, and we had talked about it. And when the accident happened, Mark Lazarus and Jeff Binky were at Turner. And they called and said, would you be interested? And I was driving a race car. And, you know, I thought about it, and I said, took about a day, and I said, yeah, I'll just set out those races. I don't have to drive them. I'm not running for a championship. I'm just a driver trying to keep my company alive and keep my dad's company alive. So went to work for Turner. I'd drive, and then I'd set out those middle 6 races, and then I'd drive the last part of the year. And it just kind of evolved into being at Turner and then doing some stuff for Speed, and then ending up here at NBC. So, no, but I never thought about it. And I never thought, I've always had opinions.
Yeah.
And not always PC opinions, I will say that.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because have you ever, I mean, you've been pretty outspoken, as you always are in life, but, you know, specific drivers, you know, Danica.
Yeah.
She gets in that car and doesn't win races. It's not the car. It's not the engines. It's not the team. They only changed one thing.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for motivating me.
Denny Hamlin, Austin Dillon. Have you ever thought, I wish I wouldn't have said it, or I should have scaled back? Have you ever regretted anything you've said?
I don't think I've ever regretted anything I've ever said. Some things I regret on how it's taken. And I'm not articulate enough sometimes, or smart enough to get from my brain out of my mouth and come out in a kinder way sometimes. But what I say, I mean. And I will say that. And I think that comes from being just in this sport for so long. I've just seen so many people come along who have BS their way and said things just to get people to like them. You either like me or you don't. I'm sorry. And you know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. That's the way it is. But when I say something, that's what it is. The hardest part about doing this thing, the TV stuff, is calling out or being totally honest with fans about people on the racetrack that you love and care about.
I love this sport more than anything else, but this is a black eye on this sport. We can talk as much about Jeff Gordon and how great a day it was for our sport, but it's countered 180 degrees by this right here. And for these guys to get out and say some of the things they say, it was just ridiculous.
You know, I made some comments about Matt Kenseth when some of his stuff went on. And I don't think I've ever had a better friend in racing than Matt Kenseth. And it hurt to have to say that. But that's the way I felt about it. And if I didn't say it...
About the incident.
Yeah, about the incident in Martinsville. And if I didn't say it, then every fan that watched me would instantly lose total respect for my opinion or what I had to say. So you have to say what you feel, and you have to say what you believe. I want to be your friend, but this is my job, and this is what I do. And I think to be able to make that transition from inside the circle, which is the racetrack, to outside the circle, and looking back in, I've been very fortunate, so it's been fun.
Well, and NASCAR is not just a sport; it's a lifestyle,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find someone who gets that.
Yeah.
And on a lighter note, and on a personal note, you've been able to find a person who gets that, and you got married. Morgan
Yep.
keeps you pretty balanced. Is it safe to say she gets you, or she tolerates you?
It's a combination of get and tolerate. She gets to tolerate.
Yeah.
How about that? That's the way I look at it. Morgan and I have been together for a number of years. We've been married for a year, and she is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I think so many times we're defined to people by what we do, not by who we are. She took the time to get to learn and understand who I was.
Would she have tolerated just the band of underwear?
She would not have tolerated the band, the earrings. I can go list, the tattoos. She would not have tolerated a lot of the stuff that I had pre-Morgan.
But what she does like is the music. Did you perform for her at your wedding?
Yes, I did. I wrote a trilogy of songs, and I call it my Morgan trilogy. I wrote a song to ask her to marry me, and then I had a song for our rehearsal dinner, and then a song for the wedding, so yes.
Well, you serenaded Morgan. We are most certainly not in her league, but we're going to have Kyle serenade us as we say goodbye.
another city somewhere where they all look the same. With faces I don't know, call me by my name.